So it is my delight to welcome Janine to our conference here. Grace and peace be with you. Right. So our first question. Please tell us about your personal prayer life. Do you think it's important for the bishop to encourage and support both clergy and laity to cultivate their prayer lives? And if so, how would you do that?
Part of my personal prayer life is informed by my training as a Third Order Franciscan, so I pray in the daily office every day. I usually pray morning prayer in Espanol cada dia. I pray it in Spanish every day, and occasionally Compline if I am still awake. And I love it because it exposes me to Scripture every day, and it makes me remember that my life is about God and not about me when I start my day. I also meditate. I used to do kind of Buddhist-like Zen meditation where I would sit and empty my mind, and now I call that centering prayer, same thing, contemplative prayer. And I do that a few times a week as well. I practice body prayer, which for me happens in running and hiking. So the only way I can describe it to you, if you haven't experienced it, is that if you're looking for that thin place where you feel like God is very, very close, when I'm running and I'm moving through air and you feel yourself pushing the air and you hear the whoosh in your ears, I feel as if I'm moving in and through God, and God is moving in and through me. And when I hike, I go to pretty places, and it's the pretty place itself that makes me feel God in all creation. And it can transform my mind pretty regularly, and I get good exercise too. I pray in the car. I'm a Californian. We're in it. And the windows are up, the air conditioning is on, and whether there's traffic or not, in general, California is beautiful. And so I'm looking at the sky, I might be looking at the ocean. Even if I'm looking at the body shop, I find it a time, that is often where I do the prayers of intention for members of my church, my family. Because I just throw them up to God. I also pray for lousy drivers. Just to protect them, protect us, protect them, protect us. Yes, I definitely think it's essential for the bishop to encourage all people to cultivate their prayer lives. And the way I would do it is, one, by having people share how they touch God and how God touches them, because that is prayer. So, a lot of people might say, another way I find God is in pulling weeds. I do not know why. But it empties my mind. I stop worrying, and just trying to get that root out makes me touch the creational power that lives in soil. And so I could say to somebody, if you can't talk to God, or morning prayer is meaningless to you, try pulling weeds or walking on the beach. For some people, it's sitting in silence with a friend, sitting with other people. So we need to share with one another how we do it, so that other people realize there are many different ways. It might be when you hold a baby, or when you cook pasta sauce, or when you play pool with a friend. It really can happen in any way. I'm at red? Are you kidding me? I'm going to keep going. I'm sorry. I'll make it short. But there are other ways. You can also teach people different ways to pray. At diocesan conventions, have the prayer center with various methods. With children in particular, it's very important to explain to them that when you pray, you can talk straight to God, Jesus, Spirit, your grandmother, whoever. Because in my work with youth, they often say, I want to say to God, I want to ask God, da-da-da-da-da. And I say, so ask God. So thank God. So tell God. Little kids are more likely to do this than teenagers. With teenagers, they'll say, so let's say it together. God, please help Sophia get an A on her Spanish test. People just need options. Sorry, I'll be done.
Our current policy in this diocese is full inclusion of our LGBT members, including ordination and clergy officiating at same-gender marriages, if they wish to do so. What is your position on these issues? What would your directives to the diocese be on this issue?
The first wedding I ever did was of a same-sex couple. couple at All Saints Pasadena, and I've probably done about 14 weddings, and at least a third of those have been same-sex weddings. I find that love is love, and that when I've met those couples and prepared them for marriage, that their love for one another is as profound as the love between heterosexual members of a couple. So I have done it and would continue to do it. In addition, our church discerned, our wider church discerned across delegates from many nations, that this was the direction we wanted to go, and I don't see that it's my place as a priest currently to go against the findings and the teachings of the church on this matter. I think it's wise. I think it's wise the way we go about making decisions in the Episcopal Church, and I would find it hard for me to oppose them. That is my position on the issue. You have a lot of questions with directives and directions coming from the bishop, which is an interesting picture of the bishop. But what I would say to the diocese on this issue is that these are the teachings of the church and the findings of the church. It is definitely permitted when it is asked of the priest to do this. At the same time, I recognize that not all people can do it due to their conscience. And our conscience is a really important arbiter. So, if a priest said, I cannot do this wedding, then I would really encourage that priest to have an open and honest and loving conversation with that couple, an attempt at some kind of healing and reconciliation, even at that moment of refusal, and then to work with that couple to find a priest who would be happy to do it. And if that priest weren't willing to go through those steps, then I would be happy to do that wedding or to find another priest to do that wedding.
So the last General Convention encouraged the trial use of alternative liturgies. Our diocese has tended to stick with liturgies from the Book of Common Prayer and Enriching our worship, with a few alternative additions for certain seasons. What is your opinion on the use of alternative liturgies within the diocese? Do you see liturgical renewal as important in the life of our diocese? And what would your directions be with regard to alternatives?
First of all, I think liturgical renewal is a given. We can't stop it. When liturgy started in the Church of England, when it separated from the Church of Rome, Thomas Cranmer and others started writing that Book of Common Prayer, and as soon as he published it, they started changing it on him. And that has been the history of the development of liturgy throughout the Anglican Communion. When the Book of Common Prayer came to the United States, we said, well, we're separating from them, so we can't pray to the King and Queen, and so we published a new Book of Common Prayer. Even when we don't put out a new Book of Common Prayer, right, we haven't had so many of them, there are liturgical renewals happening all the time. It's also important to note that our existing, the ones that you say you're using, the Book of Common Prayer and Enriching our worship, already provide us with a tremendous amount of variety. That's 7 Eucharistic prayers. And within those books of common prayer, there are things called rubrics, those words in italics that you might see, where it says you may do this, you may do that. There's really quite a lot of freedom. At the same time, we are lucky to be part of the Anglican Communion, where there are prayer books from cultures around the world that reflect various theologies and language about God, Jesus, and Spirit. And the thing is, when you read about how another culture talks about God or addresses God or whatever, it expands your understanding of and appreciation of God. You can think of another reason for Jesus dying upon the cross besides atonement for our sins, for example. You can think of God as something other than male, for example. The Book of Common Worship in England has done a tremendous amount of working to work on inclusive language when referring to the deity. And we just used it at All Saints Palo Alto on Sunday, I heard it. So it's being done in this diocese. The Book of Prayer from the Church of South India has liberation theology throughout it, which we don't show. This is a major branch of theology in the world, and it's not reflected in our current books of common prayer. So I do see it not only important in the life of our diocese, but inevitable. So my directions in regard to the alternatives would be that they be chosen thoughtfully. and that each church do its discernment about whether it might want to try something. It's also important to note that a lot of us, when we go to church, want something familiar. So I understand that there are churches that say Rite One. They use the Rite One liturgy because they love the poetry and it is familiar. That's a choice for certain churches, to have that freedom from community to make the decisions. I also think it's possible to give people opportunities to write prayers at retreats or at other experimental services to see how tough it is to come up with something even better.
How would you support, empower, and care for ECR's vocational deacons and their varied ministries?
I think it's that phrase, their varied ministries, is so telling. I've never met two deacons who are alike. What I can say about deacons is there aren't enough of them. There aren't enough in the Diocese of San Diego, and there aren't enough in the Diocese of El Camino Real. So we need to do a lot more to help people discern the call to the diaconate. And I think one of the reasons they can't is that they don't find one who looks like them, who has their life. I've seen rich deacons, poor deacons, wise deacons, crazy deacons. And they have different foci in their lives. Some are focused on the arts and religion. Some are focused on advocacy. Some are focused on getting us out of our pews and doing works of mercy and outreach in the community. And so what we need to do is publicity for the different types of ways of being a deacon. So somebody can see that they can be the CEO of a company, and they can be a deacon. And they can be a stay-at-home mom of 2 kids and be a deacon. It's also important to support them and empower them and care for them by giving them the resources to go on retreat, sabbatical, Sabbath, and vacation. A lot of the deacons I know don't have a lot of financial resources, but they are giving their lives to us and to the church. And I think it's important to raise funds so that they can rest. Because like other clergy, they often forget to stop taking care of others and to take care of themselves. So I'd like to see retreat funds be available for them.
This is question number 5. What do you believe have been your major accomplishments in life and in the leadership in the church? What skills and abilities have most helped you in these accomplishments?
So my major accomplishment in life has been raising my daughter, albeit alone. Her name is Georgia. She's 28 years old. She just graduated from law school the day after Easter. She's taking the bar in July, and you all need to pray very, very, very hard. Put it on your list. However you pray, I don't care what method you use, but she's got to pass. Because she's getting married in October to Bobby, a man I love very much and who is like a son to me now. So that has been probably the greatest joy of my life. In terms of leadership in the church, it's odd for me to speak of accomplishments because it's hard to talk about success. How do you rate success as a priest? But I'll talk about 2 moments of excitement for me. I was the first senior associate of congregational development at All Saints Pasadena. And when I got there, they wanted me, and I added the words "and welcome" to my title. It's a large church of thousands of members, ASA of about 1,200 at the time, and they were looking at helping people find connections in this huge church when they arrived. And so one of the things I did was to create a new greeters ministry. They had a small greeters ministry with a couple of members, and so I recruited 65 greeters of all ages, all races, various sexual orientations, so that when people were being greeted, they might see somebody who looked like them. And then I trained the greeters, very intentionally, to greet people who did not look like themselves. And the reason I did that is that soon after I got there, an African-American member, an elderly man, said to me, "You want to make this place welcoming to everybody? Then watch this. I'm going to walk down this path, and nobody's going to say hello to me." And there are all these people talking, happy hubbub. So here we went, And I watched, and he walked down, and everybody turned away from him and ignored him. So at the training, I said, talk to people who don't look at you. And some of the white members said, but wouldn't it be racist to greet somebody because he's black? And I said, well, consider how more painful it is for him to be ignored because he is black. That was a really joy-filled moment. The other really important moment that has happened in church life for me was recently at Good Sam. When they hired me, they said, we really want you to help us get out into the community and create partnerships in the community. They've been doing a little bit of outreach out there in the world, but making food for some place, bringing it once a month, and not really growing a relationship. And so initially I created relationships with the San Diego Organizing Project and the Rapid Response Network in 2017. And when I got that call saying, would you help with asylum seekers, I did what I could on my own individually for about a week and a half, and I realized this isn't going to last long. And then the director called me and said, could you please be the central collection point for clothing, money, food, all sorts of donations. And I thought, oh no, the church is going to say no. But I asked, and they said yes. And initially, 3 members said, we are not going to help with immigrants. Those 3 people started joining our clothing sorting team and helping. And it has changed our lives as a church, and everybody at the church regards that as a defining moment, a moment of change in the life of our church.
Last question, but not the least. What are your thoughts about the Episcopal Church as the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement? How have you embraced this new understanding of evangelism? Are you familiar with the Reclaiming Jesus statement, and do you think it has a place in our diocese?
Yes, so the Reclaiming Jesus statement was a statement published, was it a few months ago? I can't quite remember when it happened, 6, 7 months ago. It was signed by a number of noteworthy clergy around the church, including our presiding bishop, Michael Curry. And it was basically decrying language that attempts to put up boundaries between people and separations between people, and reclaim the movement of Jesus as one in which everybody is loved, just as they are. It goes deeper than that, but it would take too long to summarize it. So it's funny because I wouldn't say that it's a new understanding of evangelism to say that Jesus loves us, because to me that is what it was when it started. But it is true that our presiding bishop has done a wonderful job in the rebranding of it. I think that's what the question is getting at. And when he calls us the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement, he creates this intentional relationship between us and other people who follow Jesus, whether they consider him, whether they consider themselves Christian or not. So yes, I absolutely embraced it and gotten on board. And as far as it having a place in our diocese, from what I know about you, from what you say in your profile and the way you talk and what you do, you already do embrace the Reclaiming Jesus statement. I think what we need to do a better job of as a diocese is publicizing it, using various forms of media, the TV, radio, social media. I have been quite intentionally, without trying to, on the radio and TV a lot in San Diego the last 2 years. And it's amazing how often a radio station calls up and says, we're trying to find a Christian pastor who will talk to us about. Like, really? Okay, I will do it. That's how it's happened, just because I said yes. So we simply need to get the news out that we subscribe to the Reclaiming Jesus movement.
Okay. Allison, how are we on time? Okay, is there a question? And I'll include it.
Aaron.
You know you got 2 or 3 there.
Well, Janine, I know what you would answer to the questions I asked the previous couple of
Yeah, we know each other, yes.
So, I think in this diocese we have not been good at the parish level of really getting involved with social justice issues and care of creation issues. So if you were our bishop, how would you help us with that?
Okay, so the question is, on a parish level, how would the bishop become more involved in helping us embrace the issue of creation
And social justice.
and social justice?
This is going to take me a little bit longer than 3 minutes. It's a complicated question. Okay. Here's another exciting moment in my ministry in San Diego. San Diego is not LA. It is a more diverse political environment than LA. And I arrived in 2016. And so when there was a lot of divisive language in the country, more partisan tension between parties, what I really sought to do was to find a way to speak of social justice without attaching it to a particular party, to a particular movement in politics, but rather to continually ground it in the gospel. That is how we managed to get people who feel very differently about the border and the wall and immigrants to sort clothes for asylum seekers. Because we kept saying, here's what we're about, and this has been allowed by our government, so we're all working on something in a way that we can. And I think to the extent that you can detach proclamations about social justice from political movements, so that people with different political beliefs and theological beliefs can work together, the more success we have. And that means carefully choosing moments such as this one, when these immigrants were being allowed in by ICE and saying, see, they have permission to be here, so let's help them. That created the leverage we needed. In terms of care for creation, I think that can be an overwhelming thing for us. It looks like too big a problem. But I want to share with you that I asked my future son-in-law what it would take for somebody who doesn't believe in God to believe in God. And he said, show me how God is going to fix climate change so there's a world for my children. And at first I thought, well, that's like a throwdown, a quid pro quo. Give me this and I'll believe in God. But the more I thought about it, the more it ate at me. Because what he's saying is it looks like the world is being destroyed, and if there is an all-powerful creator who's providential, then some transformation has to take effect. But I think we need to start in very small movements. And I'll give you an example. For Lent, I, on my own, decided to get rid of all single-use plastics and as much bigger-use plastics or reusable plastics as I could. Then I found out via Facebook that 2 of my church members were doing the exact same thing. I'm wearing glasses because I stopped wearing contacts because you have to throw the plastic away. This is a life change. I'll never go back to contacts. And what we found is that other people were getting excited about what we were doing. And so I preached about it. We had a forum about it in which we shared how we were getting rid of single-use plastics. And now when people come to my house for rectory events, they say, I made sure I didn't use saran wrap, and we're not using plastic cups anymore for the youth group. I just want you to know that we're doing that. So I think if you start with a small movement, church by church, person by person, you see more hybrids on the road, you see more electric cars on the road. It's going to grow slowly. But I think when it does, we will find this transformation spreading across the church, as I've seen it happen at Good Samaritan.